David asked the question, when the foundations be destroyed, what could the righteous do? Welcome back to the Story of Liberty. This is John Bona. Let's remember way back when it was prophesied the people of Israel would ask for a king. They would ask for a king to be set over them like all the other nations round about them. And then we see in the book of Samuel that told all the words of the Lord to the people who were asking him for a king. And here's what he said. He said, "These will be the ways of the king who will reign over you. He will take your sons and appoint them to his chariots and to his horsemen, and to run before his chariots. He will take your daughters to be perfumers and cooks and bakers." Do you see what happens when man chooses to do things his way and not God's way? Well, the answer is very evident. God said, "Your sons will work in the horse stables, and your daughters in the soup kitchens." And that's what this king will do. He will take, and take some more. He will take the best fields, the vineyards and the orchards. He will take the grain. And yes, he will make people slaves. And Scripture goes on to say, in that day, when you cry out because of your king, whom you have chosen for yourself, but the Lord will not answer you in that day. Do you see the danger of having the authority in the hands of one man? Very dangerous. We know that America is great because our government was framed from a higher authority, because our founders knew that man was sinful and could not have all power vested in one man. This is what other governments did, and they always ended up with a tyrant who took advantage of the people. The three branches of government come right from Scripture in the book of Isaiah 33:22. That God is our lawmaker, God is our judge, and God is our king. Our founders discovered the ancient principles. Thomas Jefferson was one of them. These golden nuggets throughout time that our founders followed. Other great names like James Madison, Ben Franklin, Samuel Adams, John Adams, George Wythe. They were not only profound scholars and widely read, but they talked to each other. They collaborated together. They understood that on one extreme, to have too little government was not good and could lead to anarchy. But at the other extreme, too much government would lead to a loss of liberty. They felt the greatest challenge to civil government was discovering some method under structuring a government where the control would be from the people. This would eliminate both anarchy and tyranny. They understood that this formula must provide enough government to ensure justice and order, tranquility, but not so much government that it could abuse the people. They understood the balance. Many times throughout history, people have suffered because tragic things would happen without their knowledge of political science, the sound principles of what's called self-government. People would start bickering and fighting against each other, and they would always seek a way to restore order. Always some eloquent, good speaker would appear on the scene, and there seemed to be a solution. But soon, even if order was restored a while, it would be right back where they were before, under a tyrant. We saw this in the French Revolution. It may have started out with good intentions, but eventually they went to extremes. They seized control and began executing around 4,000 innocent leaders. Lafayette was one of the fortunate ones who escaped with his life. But under desperate situations, they appealed to a man named Napoleon Bonaparte to restore order. And in a short period of time, they were back in the hands of a total dictator, precisely where they had been before. See, this is exactly what would have happened in America had not our founding father, George Washington, been such a great man, a great leader, given to us by God. Because George Washington, our first president, our great leader, he knew and understood and refused to become a king. He pleaded with the military to be patient with Congress until their political leaders could work out the kinks of the new system. Washington knew what his friends and fellow founders of this great nation were seeking. Somehow they had to stop the pendulum from swinging back to a tyrant, but they had to set up a government that was not too much. In other words, they had to establish a balance of power, separation of powers. They understood this. Washington said, there is a natural and necessary progression from the extreme of anarchy to the extreme of tyranny. Wilson added, liberty and happiness have a powerful enemy on each hand. On the one hand, tyranny, and on the other, anarchy. To guard against the latter, it is necessary to give proper powers to government, and to guard against the former, it is necessary that these powers should be distributed. There you have it, folks, the division of power, the branches of our government. Throughout history, we see that almost 100% of all the human governments, the human race that had ever been lived out, might be described under ruler's law. This is a system, a government, where all power is in the ruler. And from this ruler, the consent of the governed is totally eliminated. It's either a monarchy, which is a royal government of sorts of one person, or it's an autocracy, which is the government of a dictator or tyrant, or an aristocrat, which is a government inherited, like the kings of England had. But the danger of these is the total authority and the power rests in the central government. The ruler makes the law, interprets the law, enforces the law. And this is what Madison described as tyranny. He said the accumulation of all powers, legislative, executive, and judiciary, in the same hands, whether in one or a few or many, is truly the very definition of tyranny. The very opposite of this is what our founders established in our great nation. The three branches of government. From Isaiah 33:22. The lawmakers are Congress, the judges, the courts, the king, which has now become the executive office in the United States. Under one ruler, government power is always forced upon people. There's no legislative Congress involved. Power is concentrated in one man, and the people are just treated as subjects of the ruler. All land is in the realm of the king, the ruler, and people have no unalienable rights. The government is by the rule of a man, not the consent of the governed or the rule of law. The thrust of government is always from the ruler down, from the top down, not from the people upward. When this happens, problems are always solved by creating more government, bigger government, more agencies, more administrators, and then charging we the people more taxes to pay for it. Under this new system of taxes and regulations and control from the government, they are always oppressive. Does that sound familiar, folks? Our liberty is not considered a solution to anything. See, our founders were all born in the British Empire, and they understood the limited form then under the ruler's law. And from this experience, the consent of the governed gradually emerged in America, because the oppressive rule of Britain was terminated with our own Declaration of Independence. But it took the founders another decade or so before they could establish properly a system of the consent of the governed. They knew they had to develop a system that would be entrenched in the balance of power, the separation of powers under the consent of the governed. They knew that this power rising out of the people was there to secure their rights, as Thomas Jefferson described in our independence when he said, "To secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. Whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles, and organizing its power in such form, as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness." What's wonderful about our founders is they took this system of government directly from Scripture, from ancient Israel. And we've talked about this before at the Story of Liberty. The great leader Moses, he learned to organize the people of Israel under the consent of the governed, under the people's law. Moses was blessed with a father-in-law of wisdom and told him of the problems that when they come to me, I judge between one and another. Jethro told him, "The thing that you're doing is not good, and surely you will wear away and the people." Moses learned from his father-in-law, and he told him, "Take wise men and understanding among your tribes, and I will make them rulers over you." Notice that the people themselves were to take or choose from among themselves who were best known for their wisdom and understanding. And here we have the basic model of self-government, a representative model. What Moses actually did was divide the people, consisting of about 600,000 families, into groups of 10 families each. So each of these groups contained 10 families, and elected its a leader. This alone gave Moses 60,000 newly elected assistants. Then the groups were combined together in groups of 50 families. Once more, an elected leader for each of these groups. This gave Moses another 12,000 elected leaders to help him. The next step was to combine these groups into combinations of 100 families. These groups gave him another 6,000 leaders to help him. And finally, these combinations were put into groups of 1,000 families. That gave Moses another 600 more leaders of top caliber to help govern the people. Moses created over 75,000 elected leaders to help him administrate the affairs of the people. But this was the beginning of local self-government. This new system dispersed the confusion and frustration swirling around Moses. And this was the lesson our founders learned from Moses of the consent of the governed from the Israeli people. Because of these obvious aspects, they were all a commonwealth of free people. The proclamation became part of our great American heritage when it was emblazoned upon our Liberty Bell. Proclaim liberty throughout all the land unto all the inhabitants thereof. They had a system of honest money based on gold and silver, according to weight, and a strict measurement of honest weights and measures. The land was looked upon as a private stewardship of the people, not the government. Property rights were protected. The rights of life and private liberty were secure. And the laws came into force only when approved by a majority of the people or their representatives. Never did one man make the law. And as I said, the thrust of government was always from the people upward. The government was to operate according to the principles of the rule of law, not the whims of one man. President William Henry Harrison, in his inaugural address in 1841, said it this way: "They have all seen this great danger," and here's what he said: "The great danger to our institutions does appear to me to be the accumulation in one of the departments of that which was assigned to others. Limited as are the powers which have been granted, still enough have been granted to constitute a despotism if concentrated in one of the departments, particularly the executive." Did you hear that? Folks, we cannot do an end around on our separation of powers. Blowing off the balance of power established in our branches of government and written in our Constitution is wrong. Circumventing Congress is wrong. It's been said that 4 out of 5 Americans disapprove of the current administration bypassing the U.S. Congress. As Americans, most of us work hard and play by the rules. It's only fair for the government and the administration to do the same. Folks, at times there is difficulty in distinguishing the false from the true. And folks, let me end with this. Let's never forget that fundamental to our entire system of government, of the consent of the governed, is a strong commitment to a basic code of morality. Our founders emphasized this over and over if we are to have a free society. Franklin said it, "Only a virtuous people are capable of freedom. As nations become corrupt and vicious, they have the more need of masters. John Adams was equally explicit. He said our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other. And Samuel Adams added a final warning. He said neither the wisest constitution nor the wisest laws will secure the liberty and happiness of a people whose manners are universally corrupt. America, let's remember and do what ancient Israel did. And that is to proclaim liberty throughout all the land unto all the inhabitants thereof.